Come with me if you want to live. I'm back. Hello, everybody. I am back for another movie review, and this time I'm going to review probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest movie sequel ever made in history, and this is Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Terminator 2, or T2, as fans often call it, is a sci-fi action-adventure film that came out back in 1991 by director James Cameron. This massive epic follow-up to the original film from 1984. So T2 roughly takes place about 10 years after the events of the first Terminator. And Skynet, that failed to kill Sarah Connor in the first movie with their Terminator, decide to, now that John Connor is a young kid, they decide to send another Terminator after him to finish the job. But the Resistance also is able to send a lone warrior of their own, a protector for John. And of course, this lone warrior happens to be, instead of a human this time, they actually send a reprogrammed Terminator, this time played again by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who must now protect John from the from this new Terminator that Skynet has created, a prototype, is that the best way to describe it? Is a liquid killing machine called the T-1000 that is now programmed to kill John and is obviously a more advanced model. So essentially, that is the plot of the film. That it's pretty much what you call an anti-upper, more or less. Terminator 2 is basically a much higher budgeted version of the original film. I mean, it pretty much has all the same it follows the same formulaic structure of the original movie. The only difference is the budget is way higher. Where the first movie had a budget of about $6.5 million, perfect for like an independent low-budget film. Terminator 2's budget was, it was pushing the limits at the time when it comes to movies, because Terminator 2 had a budget of $102 million, effectively making it the first movie ever to have a budget of $100 million or higher. So yeah, James Cameron was a filmmaker that was, again, literally pushing the limits of what he could do in movies. And Terminator 2 is no exception. Literally, no exception. I don't know if James Cameron had wanted to do Terminator 2. He probably had for the longest time. Maybe after the first movie, he probably had the sequel in mind, but he got attached to other things. Because right after he did the Terminator, he actually started writing two sequels, Rambo 2 and Aliens, which both got made. Then after Aliens, he started working on The Abyss, which he finished. And then after that, that's when he started working on Terminator 2, because in the first Terminator, he actually wanted to introduce the T-1000, but he didn't have the technology at the time to do that. And by the time he finished up The Abyss, realizing that the technology he had for that movie, he realized he finally had the technology he needed to create the T-1000. And also, one of the things that really helped benefit for the film's massive success is this time, instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger playing the bad guy that he was in the first movie, he's now the good guy. No intention on spoiling it, since this movie is universally well known by now. So, but I love the build-up, where you think Arnold's going to be the bad guy because he played the bad guy in the first movie, and then finally when you get to the mall scene, where you're trying to figure out who's going to be the good guy and the bad guy, because the other guy is dressed up as a cop, and you think, this must be the good guy because he's dressed up as a cop. But then all of a sudden, Arnold basically says the one phrase to John that kind of says it all for the rest of the movie. He simply says, "Get down." And and I couldn't even imagine the level of cheers that came in the movie theater when that scene happened. Literally. And, but of course, all that cheer faded away when the other guy is revealed to be a Terminator himself, and a much more advanced model, and much tougher than Arnold. Now, obviously, in real life, Robert Patrick could definitely not best Arnold Schwarzenegger if they were to get into a fight, but no. But it is pretty amazing that they made this guy tougher than Arnold. So you knew that you knew the stuff was hitting the fan this time. But Terminator 2 definitely just upped the ante in every single way from the first film. And in many ways, it changed a few things around where John Connor never got to know his father, Kyle Reese, from the first movie, because he obviously died before John was even born. But still, the Terminator made for a great father figure in the movie because he was a protective figure for John Connor, and it almost as if the Terminator was like the father figure that John Connor never got to have. So naturally, that's one element in the sequel that the first movie never really had. So that's why, in a way, the sequel is very unique, where the Terminator is like the perfect protector, pretty much, and it shows itself perfectly in every way. The movie emerged in theaters in 1991. And it had a huge opening weekend of $31 million, which at the time was the largest opening yet for an R-rated movie. And it had that year's biggest opening at the time. When all was said and done in its U.S. theatrical run, Terminator 2 made a little over $204 million at the U.S. box office. Worldwide, the film made over $500 million. And at the time, it was the third highest grossing movie ever in history, behind Star Wars and E.T. Way to go, James Cameron. You literally may put out the third highest grossing film ever at the time. And, of course, the movie was well received by critics. Critics praised the action, the acting, the visual effects were very high praised. And at the Academy Awards, the film picked up 6 nominations, and to this date is the only film of the 6 Terminator movies to receive any such nominations at the Oscars. T2 picked up 6 nominations, being nominated for visual effects, makeup, cinematography, sound editing, and film editing. And at the Oscars, the film managed to walk away with 4 wins for visual effects, makeup, sound, and sound editing. And the visual effects are just mind-blowing. And this is one film that, to this date, the visuals in the movie hold up so well, it's ridiculous. After 31 years, the film's visuals still to this date hold up incredibly well. And that is, of course, the morphing effects, the CGI to bring the T-1000 to life. While they don't really take center stage in the movie, they are there to help progress the story. And honestly, that's the way visual effects ought to be in a film. They should be there to progress the story and not be there for show. Even though the visual, like I said, they don't really take center stage, but when they do show up on screen, it's mind-blowing to see what technology can do at the time. It is literally mind-blowing. Some of the more amazing effects include the scene where the T-1000 walks out of the fire. Also, there's the scene where he comes up through the floor. There's also the scene where he walks through the bars. Also, when he oozes his way into the helicopter to the control chair. And of course, at the end, when he gets shattered to pieces and oozes himself back together. Again, at the time, this is some amazing stuff. And even to this date, it's still amazing to look at. Now, the makeup effects near the end of the film where the Terminator gets messed up really bad, the makeup was very convincing. Very, very convincing. Of course, the visual effects Terminator 2 beat out its 2 competitors were Backdraft and Hook, which both had great visuals. They really did. But obviously couldn't match up to the crazy stuff that T2 had to offer. Sadly, no Golden Globe nominations, but at the BAFTAs, the film managed to walk away with the visual effects win, at least. Now, I know James Cameron at one point was campaigning, to get Linda Hamilton, who played Sarah Connor. He was trying to campaign for her to be nominated for Best Actress because of how good she was in the movie. But unfortunately, she didn't get such a nomination. At the MTV Movie Awards, however, the film racked up an incredible number of nominations. As I mentioned in my Point Break video, Point Break was nominated for Best Action Sequence. Well, this is the movie it lost to, Terminator 2, for the LA freeway chase. Arnold Schwarzenegger was nominated, or no, he won Best Male Performance, which, yeah, rightfully so. Linda Hamilton won Most Desirable Female and Best Female Performance for the movie. And Terminator 2 picked up the very first MTV Movie Award for Best Movie of the Year. It's a shame now that most of the films at the MTV Movie Awards, you don't see movies like this get nominated anymore. No. And most of the films they nominate for Best Movie are really a joke, if you ask me. And Best Action Sequence is one category I wish they had never have done away with. I'm actually disappointed they took that category away. At the Siren Awards, Terminator 2 ended up becoming the biggest winner that year, winning quite a few awards, winning for special effects. Linda Hamilton took Best Actress. Edward Furlong, who played John Connor, won Best Performance by a Younger Actor. James Cameron took Best Director, and the film was voted Best Science Fiction Film of the Year in 1992, I believe. So yes, Terminator 2 really just is an absolute tour de force of just about awesomeness in every way. So let's talk about the Blu-ray release. I actually have two Blu-rays in this case here. This first one is the more recent release by Lionsgate, and the other one here is the Skynet edition, which I have on Blu-ray. And as you can see here, I have the Skynet edition cover sleeve inside the same case I have with the Lionsgate version. So I put both of them together, which is pretty awesome. Now, of course, when it comes to home video releases, Terminator 2 has been released countless times. I first saw it on VHS, and then eventually I had the 2-disc Ultimate Edition release on DVD by Artisan Entertainment, which was a spectacular release of the film. And then finally I got the first Blu-ray I picked up was the Skynet Edition, which again was another solid release of the movie. And then eventually I got this new one here by Lionsgate. Yeah, you can see the Blu-ray covers. The Blu-ray covers are almost identical with a few differences, like Skynet Edition logos on the top of that, and the THX logo's gone and stuff like that. So I would talk about both versions. The version I decided to watch last night was the newer release by Lionsgate here. So the video quality on the disc, Terminator 2 is one of those films that, for years they've been trying desperately to try to remaster the film as best as they could. And honestly, the new Lionsgate Blu-ray, yeah, it's not too bad. The video quality is kind of up and down, but for the most part, it definitely holds up very well for a movie of this quality. I would say for the video, out of 5 stars, I would probably give it maybe a 4. 4 out of 5. As for the audio, I really don't need to say much about it. It's the fact that it's loud. It's very loud. Yeah, the audio is just pulse-poundingly loud in English 5.1 DTS. There's even a DTS Headphone X track for people that like to wear headphones, so, literally it's pretty impressive. So the audio and the fact that this movie picked up both the sound and sound editing Oscars, this is a loud movie. And it definitely shows. Any action scene in the film, any sound effect, you're going to hear it pulse-poundingly and beautiful. It's pulse-pounding, to say the least. So out of 5 stars, the audio gets a solid 5. Solid 5 for me. As for the bonus features, well, like I said, Terminator 2, both Blu-rays do come with different selections of features. But the regular Lionsgate Blu-ray only comes with a few things. There's at least 4 making-ofs. Each one goes deep into the making of the movie. And also, the Lionsgate Blu-ray, this one here of Terminator 2, has 2 versions of the film, theatrical and special edition. The special edition version runs about 15 minutes longer than the theatrical cut. So the extra scenes, while there are not many of them, but they definitely move the story along very well. Now, for those of you that own the Skynet edition on Blu-ray, the Skynet edition actually comes with an extra 3rd version of the movie, which is an even longer version than the special edition, by about only 3 minutes. It adds 2 additional scenes. It also has an alternate ending that is not included in the theatrical or the special edition versions. But on the Blu-ray, in order to access the 3rd version, you have to punch in a code. And I'll tell you the code right here. It's 82997. By the way, 82997, that's the date that Judgment Day was supposed to be set on, August 29th, 1997, so that kind of makes sense. In the Ultimate Edition DVD by Artisan, he had to do that exact same thing. He had to punch in the code to access the third version of the movie. Is the special extended version worth watching? Yeah, it is. But the Skynet edition comes with a few additional features. Now I'll go ahead and take this disc out and I'll show you the listing of what's in here. So this is pretty much what you get. There's over 8 hours of interactive material. This is stuff you can access while the movie's playing. You got a picture-in-picture track, storyboard script mode. There's like quizzes and games you can access while the movie's playing. And there's additional stuff like there's a pair of commentary tracks. Yeah, all this stuff you can access while you're watching the movie. It's pretty amazing. But again, I feel like they may have stuffed a bit too much stuff onto one disc. So naturally, it does feel like a lot to take in. There is a great wealth of information to be found there. The only downside is that the documentaries and featurettes that are included with the new Lionsgate Blu-ray, none of that stuff is anywhere to be found, which is kind of disappointing. Now, this stuff you could actually get on the Ultimate Edition DVD release, and there's also an Extreme Edition on DVD as well, again released by Artisan, which it did include a couple of new things, but that's really about it. Now, I am aware of the 4K release of the film, but I've actually heard the 4K version isn't really all that great. Now, there are a few things that James Cameron did change in the 4K version. One of the most memorable changes is the fact that during the trench chase, when the truck jumps off the bridge and lands in the trench, again to chase after John, if you notice, look at the windshields of the truck. They actually come right out when the truck hits the ground. That's something that bothered James Cameron for years. So in the 4K version, he was able to fix that. So when the truck hits the ground, the windows do not come out of the truck. So they fixed that. But in any of the previous releases, you will see the windows come out. But in the next shot, after the truck lands, the windows are back in place. They never came out. So that was a goof that bothered him for years until when the 4K release came, or the 3D re-release of the movie came, he was given the chance to fix it. So he did. I also have the soundtrack here on CD for Terminator 2, the film scored by Brad Fiedel, who was the composer of the original film, and would go on to work with James Cameron once again on True Lies. The only disappointing factor with the Terminator 2 soundtrack here is that this CD does not include the Guns N' Roses song You Could Be Mine. If it was included on here, I think this CD would have been complete. But I think there is a CD out there of the soundtrack that does include the Guns N' Roses song. I'm pretty sure. But if you absolutely need to have the Guns N' Roses song You Could Be Mine, all you got to do is pick up a copy of the album Use Your Illusion 2 or get the Greatest Hits CD. So in that, you'd be set. The one final note I want to pass on about Terminator 2. So anyway, as for the bonus materials for the Lionsgate Blu-ray, I would say the bonus materials get a 3-star rating out of 5 for the extras. For the Skynet edition, I would probably give it a solid 5 out of 5 because, again, there's 8 hours of interactive material worth looking at, not to mention a pair of commentaries. The only downside is that you're not given the opportunity to look at any of the video features individually. Although you can, but the Blu-ray is, like I said, there's so much stuff crammed onto the Skynet edition Blu-ray, it's ridiculous. But the Skynet edition, for me, gets a solid 5 out of 5 for the extras. The other disappointing thing about the 4K release is that only the theatrical version is in 4K, not the special edition or the special extended edition. Only the theatrical cut is in 4K. So, as for the movie itself, it gets a solid 5 out of 5 for me. Literally. This movie still remains one of my personal favorite films. It's a personal favorite that I grew up on. And the last thing I want to pass on is my personal experience on Terminator 2. I watched this film at a young age. I think I was about 6 when I first saw Terminator 2. And of course, being an R-rated film and being a 6-year-old kid, I wasn't allowed to watch it. My grandfather owned a video store, and one of the VHS tapes that was there was Terminator 2, and I couldn't help but become, enchanted to the movie, and I wanted to watch it. And one of my experiences is when I was watching the movie, I got to the trench chase in the film, and my uncle came in and shut the movie off, and pretty much, chided me and, saying, hey, you can't watch that movie. You're too young for this. And I didn't even know at the time that Terminator 2 was an R-rated movie. I did not know that at the time. So, but thankfully, though, my dad came along and allowed me to watch the movie in its entirety. And this is one film that me and my dad literally bonded on. So, Dad, wherever you are up there, because my dad had since passed on last year, so I want to say thank you, Dad, for introducing me to this movie and basically allowing this film to be a part of my childhood and allowing this film to inspire me to go, because one of my favorite pastimes is I like to write. And this film was a huge inspiration on me. Many of the characters and many of the ideas they came up with were solely based on ideas and concepts that were in Terminator 2. Like many of the action set pieces, and the fact that you got, once again, a villain that cannot be destroyed no matter what you do to him. And of course, you gotta love the fact that in the first movie, you got the actor that played the bad guy in the first movie, but in the sequel, he gets some form of redemption. Now he gets to play a hero. And unfortunately, they tried that same move with the movie Don't Breathe 2, where they made the blind man the bad guy in the first movie, but in the sequel, they made him a hero. Unfortunately, that didn't go over so well, because the blind man's the same guy in both movies. But in this film, the Terminator in this movie is a different model compared to the Terminator in the first film. The first film, it was programmed to kill Sarah Connor. But this Terminator, the Resistance caught it, and they reprogrammed it to protect John Connor. So again, they're both different characters, but they act with the same actors playing them. But still, Arnold just, like I said, when it comes to the movies that he's known for, the Terminator is obviously going to be the movie character he will always be remembered for. Literally. So yes, my experience on watching T2, my dad finally let me watch the film in its entirety, and I loved it. It became a part of my childhood. And over time, this movie still mesmerizes me even to this very day, and it's now one of my personal favorite films of all time. So, honestly, I'm glad it's part of my childhood, and I am glad that it's now one of my personal favorite movies of all time that I look up to all the time. So yes, when it comes to my ranking of 5 stars out of 5, I stick with that strongly. So, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, highly recommended, one of the greatest movie sequels of all time, and out of all of James Cameron's filmography, I'd have to consider this my personal favorite of all his movies. It's hard to say because, he had also done another great movie sequel. He did Aliens, and of course he went on to do Titanic and Avatar. Again, films that were pushing the boundary on special effects and storytelling, but Terminator 2 just holds a special place in my heart, so I have to consider this my personal favorite of all his movies. So, the Blu-ray is a top-notch disc. Either of these releases you can get cheap online. Oh yeah. Even the 4K version is cheap. It's like $14 brand new, so this is a movie that's easy to get. Whichever version of the film you prefer is totally up to you. But honestly, though, a lot of fans prefer the new Blu-ray by Lionsgate. But for me, if you could get your hands on the Skynet edition, that's a good one to get too, since it has 3 versions of the film to look at and a wealth of extras. But I would also get the Lionsgate Blu-ray, the regular version, for the additional material. So, this concludes the presentation. I hope you enjoy it, and I will continue to make more videos in the days to come. So until then, take care and be safe.